it with Chad.
Okay. Well, I'm going to record this session, Tracy, anyway, so that way when we're done, I'll get it out to you and the team.
Thank you.
So that way, if you need to revisit it, you can, because we'll go through quite a bit today. And I'm not going to be too long because we only have an hour, but just some quick intros. You guys know me. I do have Johnny Whitward on with us as well. He's my Sage 100 field sales engineer, well over 20 years experience, 25 years experience over that. In Sage 100, both as an end user and as an engineer for us here at Sage. So he's seen and done a lot in the program, not so much he hasn't even covered. He's very instrumental in these presentations for me. And then I also have Ron Davis, president of IT Works, with us as well. And I invite him to the call. I usually work with him quite a bit on financial implementations for 100. So we'll leave him a little bit of time at the end of the call so he can ask you guys a few scoping questions, so that way he can get a scope of work out to you. I did put together a brief agenda that we'll cover. John usually starts out with a brief overview of 100, and then we'll kind of dive right into the modules, AP and GL. We'll cover audit trail. I know that was important to you. Customer setup and maintenance, bank rec. And then Chad mentioned that security and permissions was something that was key as well. And then we'll kind of finish out with reporting. Does that sound okay? All right. And John, I will make you presenter.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, so what we're looking at, I've already logged in with the username and password. So what we're looking at is what we call the Sage 100 Business Desktop. You'll notice I have all the modules installed. One thing I'll point out, I kind of want to start a little bit with the discussion of security kind of up front. I'm logged in with a username and password. My user has been associated with a security profile. That profile basically defines what I'm allowed to do, what I'm allowed to see while I'm in the system. So you'll notice essentially I'm logged in with sysadmin, so I can go to any module, any task based on my role. I'm going to quickly just kind of change. Security will act as a filter. So I'm going to change to a different user here, just an accounting profile, and just kind of notice when I do that, the listing of modules on the left that you see there is going to change, much more restricted based on what my role is now as an accounting user, just the, GLARAP type things. Now there's some things that may sound out of the, wait a minute, work order, but that's because there's an inquiry or something that I've given them permission that's also embedded within that menu structure. But security will essentially act as a filter for a user. So the user will only see, as far as the menu structure, what you have granted someone in their role the right to do. So I'm going to log back into my sysadmin user, and what you'll notice again is all my modules are back. So again, that's defined under Library Master. I like to call it the control module. Library Master is the module name, but it's really the control module. That's where you can define the company preferences. Role maintenance is the security I just described. So right now, again, I can go in and set up multiple companies in Sage 100 and maintain multiple companies. Role maintenance is where I define the security profiles, or essentially the jobs that people would do: accounting, sales admin, et cetera. Sysadmin is the role I'm associated with now. Under that role, essentially, I can then go in and say what modules, or even more specifically, maybe there's some things I can access in a module, some things I can't. So I can expand and even go into specific tasks and say whether or not I'm allowed to access, a specific task. And one thing I want to point out here, one very nice thing about Sage. Now, generally, if I give someone access to a maintenance task, so in this case, vendor maintenance, typically gives me the rights to create a new vendor, maintain an existing vendor, delete. Delete isn't always an option if I have open balances, etc. But I want to point out that you can grant someone access to something like this and restrict the types of activity. So maybe vendors have to go through an approval process. So in general, maybe only certain users have the ability to create a new vendor. So you can actually apply that to someone's role by, enabling, create, modify, or delete. So you can actually get a little granular underneath and define what a user can do when they're in that particular task. So it's not just granting them, they can create, modify, delete. You can actually put restrictions on the types of activities underneath that. So again, once the role is defined, I'll associate that user. When I set up the user, I will associate the user with a security profile. So you can see the user I'm logged in now, just Sage 100 demo user. And then I can come in and say, if you have just the one company, you can say the company and the specific security role. If you have multiple companies and that user has the same role, you can say all companies and that role, or you can say kind of one by one. In this company, they have this specific role. Now, when we talk about audit reports, I know that was an important thing that's mentioned. Notice that I'm assigning a user code to the user. I think someone has their phone and laptop, so maybe you can mute your computer audio. So that user code is going to follow. If I go in and I enter an AP invoice, my user code is going to be associated with that AP invoice. If I create a vendor, modify a vendor, a GL account. So that user code is something that will follow the user and be associated with what the user does while they're logged in the systems. Any questions so far? Now,
I missed
go ahead.
That. Sorry, my mic wasn't working and I had a question and then I was dialing in, so I missed some of it.
Okay, what was your question?
Originally, my original question was, you said this is, when you log in, this is what you see, and I was going to ask, where do I go in? Because we do have 4 different companies. How do I go in and select which company I want to be looking at?
Now notice down here, this is the company I'm currently logged into. So if I'm in ABC now, if I wanted to change completely to another company, I would just come down here and click that button, and then I can switch completely into and log into a different company. So if I wanted to go into EEC, I can just select that, and you'll notice it updates now to reflect that I'm in EEC. Now, what I want to point out is maybe you are in ABC, and maybe you need to do one thing. Maybe most of your time is spent in ABC, and occasionally you need to go do something, or you got one thing you need to do in EEC. Let's just do AP as an example. So for example, let's say right now I'm in ABC company. I need to create one invoice for another company. I can actually right click. Instead of selecting invoice data entry directly, I can right click. Notice I have these open with options. So what I can do is, without having to log out of ABC, I can actually set a secondary company, and I can set my secondary to be EEC. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that change. And what will happen is I am just going to open up. Notice I'm still logged into ABC, but I've now opened up invoice data entry for EEC. So I can stay logged into ABC and open up another task in another company just to do one thing. And then when I'm done here, I close out and I'm right back in ABC. So I can completely, log out of one company and log into another, so everything's logged into the other company. Or I have that ability to right click and say open with and just do that one thing in another company. Question?
So other than doing the one thing, you can only have one company open at a time.
Yeah, so I'm logged into ABC. So again, but I can open multiple things for EEC, but essentially I usually am logged into one company mainly, and I can open additional tasks in the other company. But if I want to go do a lot of things in EEC, it's easier to just log directly into EEC.
Okay. Sorry.
Now, one thing I'll point out too is the frame. You can actually associate a color a frame color to the company, so it can make it a little more clear. So ABC could be blue, EEC could remain white. If there's another company, it could be pink or green, so that you not only have the company code here, but a specific color to help you identify what company you're actually working with in that screen.
That will be good. Very good.
Okay. So that's one of those little things that, now while I'm talking about kind of preferences there, so that's the way security is set up. I want to go to view here. View is a menu that I want you to be aware of. It's kind of a user preferences. What's nice is this allows the user to make some changes without needing an admin to do things for them. One of the key things here I like to show is this application scaling. So notice again the menu font sizes. And again, I'm just going to open up vendor maintenance to kind of show you this window, how big the window opened. Now, if I go back to application scaling and go to default, notice how small the font on the on the window, on the menus get, and then the screen is going to also reflect that scaling. So this is something that a user, maybe you have your glasses on and this is fine, but maybe you left your glasses in the car and it's faster to come here and go to large, and now I can, now I can read the screen, and anything that I open, data entry, inquiry, or maintenance will reflect that scaling. So that's simply a user preference. I need things to be a little bit bigger. You can go to your view menu, application scaling, and choose the best scaling for you. Now you'll notice it kind of does a resolution enforcement. My my system can't support that extra large version, so large is as large as I can go with the resolution that my device can support. Now, other things I can do here, I can have the modules. I call it the traditional sorting. You notice now it's alphabetical, maybe easier for you to find things if things are alphabetical. The menus underneath can be sorted alphabetically, and then even the task under those menus can be sorted alphabetically, just to maybe help you find things quicker. I've worked with the system so long, I prefer the traditional sort. And then there's some other things, themes, where you can see different kind of color combinations. So again, without having to be an admin, a user can come in and select different themes to get different color combinations and contrast that, again, may help you just stare at the screen and get your job done, because that particular color combination is just easier for you to see. Questions? Now, since I'm in AP, I'm just going to stay here and just talk about the structure. So I have the module, and then we call these the module menus. Now, the structure is pretty standardized. You're always going to have a main, reports, period, and setup, utilities, explore. Check printing, electronic payment, pre-note printing is unique to AP. I don't need that in GL. GL has a budgets folder, but you will see main, you will see reports under GL. Main is always going to have maintenance, inquiry, and data entry tasks. So as you are working in the system and you need to do data entry, you won't have to guess which, what folder I need to go to or what menu do I need to open up. It's always going to be the main folder. Now, to even hone that in a little more, even though that's standardized, it may be inconvenient to have to move between, for example, GL and AP, to kind of move between the modules and bank rec. Those things that you use all the time, you can actually flag as a favorite. So if I come up here and right click on vendor maintenance, notice I have add to favorites as an option. So before I make that selection, notice my focus over here is still modules. As soon as I say add to favorites, it will open up my favorites menu and will drop that new selection onto the bottom. Now what I can do is actually, if I call that something else, I could rename it. So if I just say vendors or vendor setup, I could rename it to what I want to call it. And then you'll notice that I have already added things to my favorites menu. So what makes sense to me is to be able to group these in an order that, kind of customer things or vendor things or general ledger things together. So I can take this item and move it up here to where I've created an AP grouping. Now the grouping I created with those little lines, I can just insert, we call them separators here, that will put a line in, or I can insert folders and drop things into folders. So this gives you the ability to identify those things that you're doing all the time, flag it as a favorite, drop it on your favorites menu. From there, you can apply what you call that task to the menu, to your favorites menu. You can organize the favorites menu with folders or the separators to kind of group things together. Once you have it set up the way you like, notice at the top, if I go back to modules and I go to favorites, I can have those items displayed at the top. So essentially, as I'm working throughout the day, I keep my favorites open. All I have to do is come up and, I can open up those things instead of having to navigate between AR or AP and GL, the different folders and modules. I can just open up my favorites menu and open up that thing that I need right away without having to navigate between modules and menus. And that is unique to the user. That would be specific to that user. So if I change it, I apply a nickname, it won't affect anyone else. It will just affect it on my favorites menu. Questions? Yeah. Another tool that we have to get around the system, visual process flows. You'll notice here it's kind of based on functionality instead of a specific module. I'm going to hone in on AP. Now, in this case, what you'll see is instead of this folder-driven navigation, when I open up a visual process flow, it's kind of a visual menu or a map of the process. So in this case, what you see is accounts payable from start to finish, vendor maintenance, various inquiries, reports, AP invoice data entry, processing invoices for payment, either manual checks, direct checks, or show me which invoices are due based on specific due dates. So this actually lays out a process from start to finish in the order that it would normally occur. So you, as users, would have a reference to step 1, step 2, step 3, where you're at in the process. And it's not just a help screen. The text and the buttons are linked to the task. So selecting this button would open vendor maintenance. Selecting, the text here or the button would open AP invoice data entry. So it's a convenient tool because it puts everything in a single screen and gives you that kind of reference in the natural order or processing of those different steps. Questions? What's nice is we provide these templates, but if you have something a little different, or you say, it would be nice if I had the ability to launch something else from this screen, these can be modified to add additional. So essentially, I could add buttons and text to launch other things. I can delete something that I don't use. And I can also create or embed links to launch web pages. So I can embed URLs into the page to launch a website if there's something you need to go out and check on a web page. So again, all of those combinations as far as that full menu structure, favorites, and these tools, we don't say you have to use one or the other. You can use any combination of those that makes sense for you and the user. Any questions?
Mm-mm.
No. So let's go in. Now, there's some things that come automatically with Sage 100 when you buy Sage 100. One of those tools is Paperless Office. So as you are processing transactions in the system, you have the ability to enable what we call Paperless Office. So I can enable and set up Paperless Office. And once I do, you'll need to notice these viewers. So journals and registers. So those are the accounting transactions. So you'll notice here I have some transactions being captured here and stored here. So as I am posting, for example, let's say an AP invoice register, I can print that and put it, I can put it in a file cabinet. Should I need to audit that transaction, go try to find that transactional register from that transaction when I posted that AP invoice register. This gives you the option to have those generated to PDF and stored electronically. So in this case, I can always drill into, and I think I've password protected this, so let me just put in my password here. And I can retrieve that document. So should I need to, again, kind of, find the accounting documentation for a transaction, I have generated and saved that electronically. So the advantage of this versus a filing cabinet, it can be any and all, GL transactions, bank reconciliation, any and all transactions from the accounting perspective where you would normally print that, put in the filing cabinet, you can have it generated to PDF and saved electronically, which gives you the ability to use electronic search. What source journal, what journal number, what date range, what user. So you can retrieve those through electronic search functionality should in the event that one of those transactions is audited. Now, likewise, go ahead.
Sorry, can you attach things like the bank reconciliation, could we like attach a document to it?
These
bank statement.
There's ways to do that. Now, in this case, these are all things that have been generated by Sage 100. So period end reports that you want to create, check remittance advice, things of that nature that Sage generates. What we can do for Sage 100, let me go in and kind of show you. I'll use AP as an example, vendor maintenance. So let's say that I have a contract with a vendor and I want to scan and attach the contract. In this case, this is my landlord. Let's say I want to attach my rental agreement to this little button. We call this a memo. And within the memo, I can have multiple memos. In this case, I just have one memo, and notice essentially the rental agreement with an attachment. So what I can do is I can have more than one memo. So I can just create, I'll just say scan, and then I can point to where I'm just going to pull up a PDF document that I have saved here. It's not really so I'm just going to reference this guy here. So I'm just pointing to a document that I have saved, and then I'm going to hit accept. So now you'll notice that I have two. So the scan, and I can just click this to preview that document. So this is functionality that, in this case, a vendor contract. I can do the same thing when I record an invoice from a vendor. At the invoice level, the scan of the invoice from the vendor can be attached to the invoice that I'm creating, and through a memo. And let me just see bank rec. I haven't had that question in bank rec, but let me just double check. I'm not sure if memo functionality is available here, but we can double check. It's not here. I may have to double check on that. Let me just see, maybe it's on the bank code.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
You're saying, say these electronically, the journal entries we do, can we save the journal entries we do electronically?
So like a GL journal entry, when you update that GL journal entry, that that printed record of that can be generated to PDF and saved electronically.
Okay.
So that would be something. I don't have any examples of that, but let me go back here to kind of show you on the document type, if we get down to, GL allocation journals, budget revision registers, GL transaction registers, general journals, recurring journal, and transaction journals, all of the documentation associated with those specific transactions can be generated to PDF and saved electronically. So you would have, GL, the journal number, and you can always retrieve those to review what that entry was.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, paperless comes automatically out of the box. You'll get that. It's just bundled with the system. Now, another tool that I want you to be aware of is a tool called Visual Integrator. Visual Integrator is an import-export tool. I understand, for example, that you are payroll's outsourced. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So more than likely, are you getting some form of file from your payroll service provider after the payroll runs? So what we could do here, so you normally would need to go in and do some kind of GL entry associated with that payroll run. So what we could do is, instead of having to look at that and manually do the GL entry, we could build an import job and map to the file provided by your payroll service provider. So in this case, what I would do is I would just say GL PR entry. I'll just give it a name, and then I would point to the GL table where the transaction entry file, where those, the file that handles those transaction entries. Let me just see here. I'm just going. So I can link to multiple file or pull from multiple file types. So the next screen, I'm just going to confirm, yes, that's a new job. So I can import from ASCII to limited D-based Lotus or Excel or ODBC data sources. So I'll just say Excel in this case. And then what I do here is I basically am able to tell Sage 100, this is where you'll find the GL account number. This is where you'll find the debit amount. This is where you'll find the credit amount. So it's just pointing Sage 100 to data in a file or spreadsheet and telling it what that information is, the length of that information, the column or position, etc. So that information can be pulled from that file and imported into Sage 100 as a time saver and probably more accuracy. So you don't have someone misreading something. It's pulled directly from the file and would be imported as a GL transaction that you can review and then update. Now that can also be done for AP invoices, anything that you need to pull in information from another source. We can import versus having to type it. Any data entry that I can type into the system, if I have a file, I could import into versus having to key in data. Questions?
Yeah, we currently do import our payroll files as well as our credit card invoice, because that's several lines. So I'm able to set it up and import it into Sage 50. So
okay, so probably very similar to that process. Now this is also going to be a tool that's going to be heavily used in the implementation process. So the chart of accounts, your vendors, open invoices will be imported into the system, likely using Visual Integrator. Let's see. Now let me ask you. I'm going to move into the GL area now. Let me ask you on the chart of accounts, how is your chart of accounts now, your account numbering system? Is it sufficient? Is it capturing all the detail you need? Is there room for improvement? How many segments are included in your current chart of accounts, and does it differ by company that you're tracking?
We have very long GL numbers, general ledger numbers. And currently Sage 50, you can't see when you're in something, you can't see the whole number. Like if you're entering an invoice in, you can't see the whole number because it's so long.
How long? How many characters are in the account number?
Oh, I think 13 or 15. I don't remember.
Okay. Okay.
I have to count the dash because there's dashes in between the segments.
Okay. Well, let me kind of show. I'm going to show you. This is my demo data. I just want to show you how my demo data is set up. You don't have to use this. I have 3 segments, 3, 2, and 2. Sage 100 can support up to 32 characters and up to 10 segments. So very complex or very simple. A lot of customers have one or, I think the majority of customers are probably between one to 3 segments, probably less 4, 4. I've heard no one say that they needed 10 with 32 characters. But we can support 13 or, 14, as you mentioned, as, well within Sage 100 capabilities.
We have 5 segments.
Okay.
Now that I see what you're talking about, we have 5 segments, and they're separated by the dash.
Okay. Now, do those segments, do they represent departments, locations, cost centers, things of that nature? Is it kind of similar where you have a segment representing something? Okay. So we can accommodate that. So we can bring over your exact chart of accounts. If there's room for, improvement, you need more segments, that can definitely be done. Now, even let's say you bring it over now and in the future, an additional segment or more segments may be needed in the future, there's actually utilities that would allow you to add segments later in the future should that need arise. So that could be handled in the future should you need to. But we should definitely be able to accommodate your current chart of accounts and, account for all your segmentation and what each sub-account represents. Questions? All right. So let me go up. Now, you'll notice account maintenance and inquiry. Same information I'm going to see the same things Inquiry is view only. So someone who just needs to see information, but you would never want them to make a change, grant them access to inquiry and they'll never be able to make a change. All they can do is see. Maintenance gives me the ability to not only see, but also make changes or update and maintain that account. Depending on my, those little granular options, I can make that just view only. But in general, inquiry is view only. Maintenance means I can work with and maintain. So I'm going to go to account maintenance. Now, if you know your account number, you can always just type it in. Let's say it starts with 115, so I'm just going to use 115 inventory because I just know that off the top of my head. So I can key as much as I know. I can use the F2 key or this magnifying glass, the lookup button, and you'll notice that essentially it's like a begins with. Show me all the accounts that begin with that value. So key as much as you know, hit F2 or the lookup, and it will show you all the accounts that begin with the value that you typed in. Now, I can also, if I go to the lookup, I can say, what I know. Maybe I know the description contains cash. So let's say it contains cash now, and then that's going to show me all the accounts that have cash in the description field. So, and this lookup itself can be customized. If you need more fields, I have it pretty simple there as far as the columns of data that I can search for, but I can come to custom and actually, I'll just say new, and then I can actually add a whole, anything and all things here can be added as searchable columns, if that would help you find that. Now, another nice thing is, if I know the description, I don't even have to use the lookup to say description contains. I can actually start to type the description into the account number field, and you'll notice what you're getting here is the description and then the account number. So the more specific I get, the narrower the selection becomes. I'm going to go ahead and select travel and entertainment here. Now on the main tab, I get my account number, my description. If I need a memo associated, I can, attach a memo and scan something and attach it to this particular budget code if I need to. Main tab is going to show me my group, my category, my type, status, start and end date, cash flow type if applicable. Roll-up codes are optional, so you can enable roll-up codes and have roll-up codes associated with jail accounts. History is going to show me my beginning balance, my debits, my credits, my ending balance. Now this little toggle button over here will give me the net change. So instead of having to get the calculator out, this will just kind of collapse the credits and debits and give you the net change. So you can expand and contract that with that little toggle button there. Variance. Now in this case, I chose this particular account because it has a budget associated with it. So if you have an account that has a budget, I can build the budget right within the account itself. Original, I have a revised budget. I can have an unlimited number of budget revisions. Some little tool sets over here for selecting the budget, clearing, calculation wizards, clearing the budget, resetting cells. So I can have, simple budgets, unlimited number of budget revisions associated directly with NGL. And then this gives me the ability to compare the budget to activity or the revised budget. And let's say maybe it's an account that doesn't have a budget. I can look at a different year's activity versus this year to have variance details compared to, a previous year's activity. So again, I can drill down and kind of see all that detail. Now transactions is going to show me all of the detail, all the debits and credits, and I can drill down to the source journal, see those details. Now, when journal entries are entered, if you have reversing, it can automatically reverse if there's a reversing date. But there's also the ability, this little button here, if something wasn't set for a reversal and it needs to be reversed, this would give you the ability with the click of a button to automatically create a reversing entry. So you'll see reversal is complete, review the entry in journal entry. So instead of having to manually create the journal entry reversal, that little button created the reversal entry for me. So just kind of a little time saver to reverse something out if it didn't have an automatic reversing date associated with it. Any questions on the account maintenance screen, any of the tabs? Okay, so let me go, I'm going to go because now that reversal, so if I go to journal entry, that reversal didn't automatically get committed and posted, it created the reversal. So I'm going to use this flashlight entry. So here's that reversal that the system created automatically with that button. So what I can do is go ahead and select that one to kind of show you. So it, posting dates today, reversal of AP journal. So it automatically flagged it as a reversal of that journal. And then here that was, wouldn't have been hard to do the data entry on this. It wasn't a lot of lines. It was just 5 lines. What is 5 lines of data entry that I didn't have to enter to the reversal? It booked it for me. I've had some that were 30 or 40 lines that, again, just a time saver. I can come in and review, make sure it's correct. Now, let's say that that reversal, but let's say I need to create a manual. I'm going to do one on my own. I need to create a journal entry. What I'm going to do is take the source journal. So let's just use bank reconciliation as the source journal. I'm just going to say the next entry number. So I can specify, I have my system preferences saying default the posting date to my system date. You can override that and select your posting date. I just have it defaulting to my system date. I can specify a reversing date. So if I want this to reverse out next month, I can just say August and go ahead and just say, I'll just, say the 10th of next month. Enter journal comment. Then I go to the lines tab. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Let me just squeeze this over here. Now you'll notice that, let's say you're very familiar with the descriptions and you know the account numbers, you don't need the description. I can actually move that down out of the way. So I have account number, debit, credit, and then the comment. So maybe you're familiar enough with the account numbers, you don't need to see the description. So you just want to be able to come in and enter, the account, the debit amount, the credit. Maybe you want that backup to make sure you have that. So I can drag that back up. So each user, when you see a screen like this, we call it dual grid entry, you can drag and drop and put the column where you want it. If it's something that you want to see, maybe for some weird reason you want the description between the debit and credit, you can have it that way. It won't affect anyone else. It would just be for you. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in front. And it will remember every time you open it up, it will be laid out the way you had it the last time. So again, to do a general journal entry, what I'm going to do is come in and we'll just take cash on hand and we'll just debit that by 100. And then I'm going to come in and create my credit account and we're going to say we got that out of savings. Questions?
So, let's say I have to create an ACH transaction. I can put comments here that says, week 1 claims funding. And will the comments show up on report?
So, yeah, so depending on, like for example, let me kind of go over to report. So let's see here. So depending on, a lot of the times, notice here print so if you are entering comments, so when you go to print like a general ledger detail report, you have the option to not include comments, partial comments, or the full comment. So that will be available for you to include into your reporting to give you that, as long as the, in this case, here's where this was an AR cash receipt. So it has the customer, the check number, and the batch number. So you'll see, the comments in full, as long as, so they are captured and would be available to be printing on reports.
The reason I'm asking is when we're doing our financials, a lot of times we're asked, well, what was this entry for? So in Sage 50, we put it in the description. This was a Capital One credit card entry that needed to be reclassed to a different general ledger. Because it was a prior month and we just couldn't change the entry. And that would be something that we would need to see instead of just the account number, the account description, and the dollar amount.
Yeah. So again, as long as you're entering the comment field in the comments when you post it, that comment field's a part of the database, and can be, like that report gave me the option to include the print. Now, the financial, like a financial report, we may have to customize the report, but again, the reports can be customized to include the comment field if that's something that needs to be shown.
Well, I wouldn't show it on the financial statements, or it would just be like the general ledger.
Like the report?
On the journal report.
Or even like, you know, here, because let's say, let me just go to, let me just do AP. I'm looking for accounts payable here. So again, PO receipts, or, you know, you can actually format too, as far as like, you know, this is kind of AP things. So reversal entries, AP, you know, we can even say PO, you know, PO, we're not really talking about PO in your system, but, you know, that information, you know, comments are available to be included in the report. So you have that explanation of what, you know, what this transaction was for or related to.
Okay.
Now, what's nice too is, let me kind of show you, for example, in like for AP transactions flowing. So let me go to setup real quick in AP options. So you actually have the ability, let me go to additional. Now notice here, AP invoice register, manual check register, electronic check register. I'm saying to print in detail, to post in detail to from AP to the general ledger. And then for the invoice register, I can pick my comment. So include, in this case, for invoice transactions, include the vendor number, the invoice number, and the detailed comment that I'm entering. For manual checks, include the vendor number, the vendor name, and the comment. For the checks and electronic payments, the vendor name and the check number. So you have all these different comment options as far as what detail, what formatting of the information from the subledger, AP in this case, for a specific type of transaction, what format of detail information do you want to be flow from AP to the GL? Questions?
No.
All right. So let me ask you, so let's say, so on, if still being in GL, I want to kind of show you again reports. Any of the reports that you see under the reports menu, all of those are created with Crystal reports. Should you need to make a change, so again, I can come in and run those as they are. Maybe you need, let's say it'd be nice if this had a little different sort, or had one field moved over or added an additional field. If I use the drop-down box and go to Designer, it will actually open up the standard report in Crystal in the report designer, and I can make changes to that. Now, honestly, Crystal is not the most user-friendly tool. You got to, you know, there's training available. You can get trained on how to use Crystal to create custom reports. That can be done as a, you know, part of the implementation if you know you need customizations to the reports. So that is something that reports can be developed for and created specifically for your needs through Crystal reports here. And there's also another tool. So again, these are based in Crystal reports. For financial reporting, your best bet is probably, there are financial reports available here through Crystal, but Sage Intelligence reporting, you have Report Manager. I already have it open down here. This is an authoring tool that has Excel as the engine. The reporting engine here is Excel, but it's not just Excel by itself where you have to manually dump, you know, the account numbers and create your formulas by yourself. We have created and provided templates for financials and other reports that, for example, if I come here, I'm going to go to Financial Report Designer. I have the balance sheet layout here in this case. Now, what's nice here, if I ran a financial report inside of Sage 100 and even preview it to the screen, I'm looking at a preview of a printed paper. I can't drill down, I can't expand or contract. What I see in that preview is what I would get on a piece of paper. In this case, I'm in an Excel worksheet. So I have my balance sheet for ABC for fiscal year 2020. Now I'm looking at summarized by category, assets, liability. Because it's Excel, I'm looking at the summarized view, but I can expand this out and have all of the accounts associated with those categories. And because it's Excel, I even have the ability, for example, to right-click, drill down. So, and then from there, I can even, depending on how this was created, I may be able to drill down to transaction level here. This one, I don't have the right details set up for that drill down, but you can even drill down further, provided the underlying information is provided in that report. You can't get that in Crystal. This is available because it is an Excel worksheet. So again, starting at the top, summarize, just show me the, summarized view of the categories or detailed view account by account. Now, what's nice here is if this needs to be changed, if you want to change this, you'll notice I have different tools. I have what we call the task pane, and I have, balance sheet. If I wanted a trial balance, all I have to do is click trial balance. It's going to generate the layout for trial balance. Now, one thing I'll have to do is update the fiscal year to go to 2020. So it will update. So I have no data in 18. I'm just going to go 2020, and it will automatically pull that information from my geo into my trial balance. Let's say I want to change the layout or the format of this. I can come to this Manage button, and this will show me all of my available layouts, and then I can say Edit. And in this case, the balance sheet, columns, row spacer, so I can drag and drop, move things around. With your GL account structure, if the different segments, reporting trees can basically, those segments represent, cities, departments, locations, cost centers. We can expand that, and basically you can build these reports to include, exclude specific, and departments or locations, cost centers based on your GL account segmentation. Questions? Now, what's nice here, let's say if you are kind of an Excel person and you're like, well, that's, I wonder how they got to this. I would like to create my own version of this, but I'm kind of curious how they got to this. If I right click and say unhide, all the worksheets are kind of hidden by default. So you can kind of look at all the worksheets that were used to generate this layout by unhiding. And even we give you tools. Let me just cancel here. I'm going to create a new blank. If I go to list, let's say you want to do your own thing. If I go to accounts under the list, this is actually going to pull my GL accounts into my worksheet. And then I can delete any, columns of data that I don't want to use. So I have account number description, and then I even have formulas available. Opening balance, closing balance, actual. I can pull those over. Now, it's not going to instantly do anything for me. I would have to drill into that formula and kind of give it, what rows and ranges and columns to look at to incorporate into that formula. But we do provide formulas for you to incorporate should you want to do your own reporting from scratch. Questions? Now, while I'm here, some things that are nice, again, you have this tool. BI tools is also here, so I can do the same thing. So quick generate here is the same thing, balance sheet. So it's the same thing as creating the balance sheet or the income statement from the task pane. It's just a different way to access it. Same thing, quick edit. I can pick the one I want to edit and make the same kind of changes here. Key thing I want to point out while I'm here is notice this distribution settings and the instructions. What I can do is if these reports need to be distributed to specific people on a specific time frame, I can basically associate distribution settings with that report and use Windows Task Scheduler to have this report essentially generated at a specific time and fire off so that report can be generated. Let's say at 5 o'clock in the morning, it generates and emails that to the people who are going to need that when they get into the office. So that can be set up to essentially, who should get that report and fire it off, essentially, so it's waiting for them when they get into the office. Questions? I'm not limited. I can report on anything in the database. So if I need to look at, I'm going to show you another report. We have a dashboard. Now, some of the dashboard won't really incorporate because I know you don't sell items, but this is kind of incorporating profit and loss, top 5 expenses. Now, items and customers may not come into play, but just kind of gives you an idea. I can look at kind of a combined, kind of financial view, but also be looking at, expenses. Where did expenses come from, and different things. So it's not limited to strictly kind of financial details. I can pull in AP, bank rec, anything in Sage 100. I have access to that data and can be pulled into Excel to create reports for. Now, I want to show you one additional report. The report I'm about to show you isn't installed automatically. It can be added. There's we call it the report utility. That report utility gives you the ability to kind of see different reports available for different modules. You get kind of a preview and a description of that, and you can say, that sounds good, I want to add it, and it will allow you to basically download it and add it to your system automatically. I've had a lot of people, I show this. So where we were looking at kind of the balance sheet, the income statement, this is kind of a higher level dashboard view of financial health check. So you can kind of see, just different details at a glance in a dashboard format. And, I can just pick my period and have it update automatically by changing the period or year over here on the other side. And then there's different pages that I can go to get, different data and detail related to this report. And again, it's not there automatically, but it's available for free that can be added to the system. So any questions? So I think what you'll find here is I think more people generally have, particularly in the accounting world, are somewhat familiar with Excel in varying degrees, either intermediate or expert level, because they just had to be as an accountant. So versus Crystal, that's a tool that most people already know. So you can leverage your knowledge of Excel and just have to kind of learn the tool set that's been added to get reporting out of the system. Let's see here. So any questions on go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just I have to go to another meeting, but I'll leave Marie and Donna and Chad. So I don't know if you guys have hard stops or if you're able to continue on. But Donna, El Marie, if you have any questions or if you think of anything later, of course you can send them to me and I'll relay them on. I just wanted to let you know that I have to step away here in just a minute or two. So while there was a break, I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I really appreciate this. This was very enlightening.
And Tracy, I'll get an email out to you because I don't think we talked about the license count you're going to need, so I can get you a quote for the software piece of it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So you're gonna let me know what that is. But I'm fine as far as time, John and Ron, if you guys are okay to hang on for a little while longer.
I'm good.
Yeah, El Marie, Donna, I didn't know if you guys had a hard stop, or Chad.
I'm okay for a little while.
Yeah, I'm okay for now.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure because I know it's Donna and El Marie are two people that it's kind of hard to get them together. So we wanted to make sure that everything was covered to their, answered all of their questions. And Chad, do you know our current license count? Is it 7?
I think it's 8, but the 8th account is the admin account that we have to have because that's the way the auditors want us set up.
Okay. So
I'm pretty sure it's seven licensed users in the finance realm, and then just our admin account for managing accounts and security.
Okay. So yes, for the quote then.
Okay.
I think we were going to also add something or someone for Angela Dunn at one point.
For the foundation?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be one of those view only, so she could pull her own reports. She wasn't going to be able to, she doesn't enter anything in the system. She just needed to be able to view something.
Well, it still requires.
Okay, so yeah, for the licenses, I don't know if that's a different cost.
If it's just, it would be, but if it's just reports that she needs to look at, I mean, those reports can be built and scheduled to send to her via email. She wouldn't need a license to view them if that's all she's doing.
Oh,
That calls up to you, though.
well,
Right, well, sorry.
no,
I don't know exactly where we are on that. And also with these, the reports that both Elmarie and I produce at the after the month-end close, the managers and stuff are, you know, in limbo waiting for us to be able to get to those reports and send them out. And then if they have questions, you know, they're not able to drill down. They're stuck with just what we were able to provide them. So I don't know if, you know, I think at one point we were talking about having the managers that were in charge of their, you know, budgets, like Tracy, have access to go in and pull their own, you know, when they see the, you know, your department.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Elmarie.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, no, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, the rest of the team, is there anything you need John to show, or anything that, you know, might have been missed that you didn't see?
One of the things that we deal with when we're entering our invoices is some invoices go to, let's see, because we provide patient services. One of the things that we currently do is we have an invoice that's for multiple patients. And we have to, for search information, we have to put that invoice number under the patient name. So if the invoice is $10,000, but it's for 10 different patients, $1,000 each, then we have to enter that invoice 10 different times with the patient's name and then that particular patient's dollar amount. Is there a way in this system to reference the original invoice number from the vendor? We do have that currently in Sage 50, which allows us to do searches when the vendor, you know, inquiries about the invoice.
Now, the invoice, are you talking about an AP invoice needs to reference the customer invoice? I just want to make sure we're talking about an AR invoice and an AP invoice.
No, an AP invoice.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
We don't use the system for AR. We have a different system for AR. So in AP, we have like MobileX is one of our vendors that does this, and they bill us for the month for usually about 20 different patients, and so that we can track the patient's information, we have to enter that invoice 10 separate times because the invoice number has to have the patient's name in it.
Now,
that sounds confusing, doesn't it?
Well, so let me, so you have the vendor, in this case, I'm using Container Corp, so that's my vendor. Now, is the invoice number here, do you have a unique invoice number from the vendor, but then that has to be referenced to the customer? Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Where are you referencing that? Does that customer, the patient invoice number, does that need to be referenced at the header level, tied directly to that, or at the line level?
It's the header level. It's not the patient's invoice number. We just have to reference the patient's name. So if they need to know what all's been paid for this patient, what expenses we've incurred for this patient, we can search by the patient's name.
So what
not
I would,
by
what
the
we,
vendor's invoice number. But if the vendor
so-
calls, they're going to call and ask about their invoice number.
okay. So they would reference this number, but
The
there
vendor.
may be a case, yeah, so, but in some cases you may need to know the patient name that's associated with this. So
Correct.
so there is a tool. So right out of the box, you notice I don't have any place for that, but let me kind of show you what's nice about Sage 100. I'm going to close out of here. I'm going to go to Custom Office. This is another tool that comes automatically out of the box. I'm going to create a patient name field for the invoice header. So I can put a patient name on the invoice header so that can be referenced. So let me kind of show. So this gives me the ability, if I need additional information that Sage didn't have a place for. So I'm going to go to the AP. I don't want the invoice header. Let me go to AP. So these are all the tables available. I can do this across the board. So I'm going to find the AP invoice header file. Let me just scroll down here. So this is what I'm looking for. I'm going to right click and say edit. And I'm just going to say, if I can spell patient. So I'm just creating the custom field from scratch. Doesn't exist now, but it's about to. So I'm just I'm going to give that up to, maybe there's a long name, so up to 30 characters, or I can make it really long. Let me just make it 50, just in case. So
That's a big name.
just in case. Maybe there's one with lots of hyphens, so we're prepared. So I'm just going to say, now I'm going to say OK. So what you're going to see now is that field is being added to the table, so it's becoming a part of the database. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to back to the invoice, and I'm going to add that field to the screen. So right now it's just adding that field to the database, so it's becoming a part of the tables. I can add it to lookups. So it's going to be something that now going forward, so right there, it's updated, it's added. So now what I'm going to do is going to go back to AP invoice data entry, and I'm going to right click here and say customizer, and then I have to have security permissions to do this. But just essentially what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find a place that maybe having such a big, long thing may not be working to my advantage now, because now I have room for a 50 character field. So let me just kind of show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just squeeze it down here at the bottom. I can do a better job of this later. And again, I didn't necessarily make it that big, but I'm going to just I'm going to squeeze it down here at the bottom.
Maybe.
There you go. But this gives you the ability, so you can see I can select, I want to add that. So it's not going to be pretty in this instance. We could do a better job of this later, but notice now I have a place for a patient name. I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. And now going forward, I will be able to, when I create an AP invoice, if that patient needs to be associated with that, it's down here at the bottom. So now I can, when I'm creating that invoice, I have the ability to reference a patient name, so that I will have the ability, when I do invoice history lookups, to add patient name as a searchable column. So I'd be able to look for the invoice by the patient name. Questions?
Awesome. Awesome.
So let me just go ahead and do Container Corp here. So again, my placement wasn't all that pretty, but I said 50 characters, and then I'm going to go with a very simple one.
John Doe.
And then the line, and then the lines, it's the deal account, everything else is standard, but that now can become part of that invoice record. So once I post this, going forward, all the invoices now can also have the patient name accounted for in the invoice record itself. I'm going to go ahead and post this and update this. And then let me just do, let's see here. So I have that ability now. Let me just kind of go down. I'll go to Explore as an example and notice the Open Invoices view. By default, these are the details. So what I can do now is this is kind of shows me all the invoices in a single place. What I can do is right click and go to column settings and let's see. So I'm going to say add, and I'm going to expand this out and come down to the bottom. Now I may need to, I think I need, in this case, what I need to do, that was in data entry. I need to take that field and add it in multiple places. So I would also need to take the field that I created in invoice data entry and add it to this table. And then I would need to add it to history so it can flow through the system. But we can definitely accomplish adding that so it becomes a part of the invoice record, so you can search by the patient name and see all the invoices tied to that patient name. Questions?
Okay. You just brought up a good thing when you're going through posting. So right now, whether we're keying an AP invoice or we're keying a journal entry, the minute we hit save or print, it posts.
That is not the case in Sage 100.
Okay.
So, for example, if I do an AP, now notice if I come here and now there's no entry. So when I'll just create a new AP invoice here real quick for Airway. So when I'm entering this invoice, I am, when I hit accept, that invoice is entered and it's in the data entry, but it's not committed yet. So if I use the lookup, that's there. It's not posted yet. So it's in data entry. So it's not committed and posted until I hit the printer icon or go to my invoice register. So I can either hit the, basically this is the same thing as invoice register. So I'm going to hit the printer icon. This gives me the opportunity. This is where I'm verifying my posting date. My current accounting period and my demo date is still 5/31. Now notice today's date was a future date, but as soon as I back that out, no problem with the current period. I can't post to a closed period. So this is my opportunity to verify. So invoice register, verify the vendor, the invoice number, the GL account. And then essentially after that, I get, I think by division, because other divisions turned on. So now, do you want to update? So it won't commit and post this until I answer yes. So that printout, if I saw a mistake, I'm like, oops, I don't want to post that. I could say no and go back and make a correction to the data entry file. If there was no problems, everything was good, and I wanted to post and commit, I'll say yes. So it's not that instant saving and posting and committing the transaction as soon as you hit save. In this case, you put it into data entry. It's not committed and posted until you run the register and confirm that you want to update.
So she could enter several invoices in, and then run the register before she posts it to review them, or no?
Correct. Yes. So you can do, you could have 10 or 15 invoices in data entry that you've just been entering, and then when you're ready, when you say, okay, I'm ready to post these, you hit the register or that printer icon. It will print out the register, show you the entries that you have in data entry, let you verify that's correct, and then ask you, do you want to post? And if you say yes,
okay,
it's committing and posting those. If you found a mistake, you could say no and go back to data entry and make your correction. If you have more than one person doing data entry at the same time, you can even turn on, I can turn on batch entry, so that if I do that, when I go in, I'm going to create a batch number. So now I'm creating invoices in batch number 2. So I could have 15 invoices in there that I've been working on all morning. Let's say you have one that you need to enter. You can come in and create batch number 3, enter your one invoice, print and update without interfering with me, because I'm in batch number 2. So I don't know if you have more than one person doing things at the same time. A lot of people, batches is kind of cumbersome. If you're by yourself, you really don't need it. But if you have multiple
Right.
people that may need to do the same thing at the same time, it becomes convenient because I can be in a batch. I can be entering in a batch. You can come in an hour later, enter your 1 or 2 invoices, print and update without interfering with me. And mine are still in there unposted.
Okay.
Now, let me ask you this. I know that you mentioned ACH. In Sage 50, are you paying vendors through ACH in Sage 50 now?
Yes.
Okay. So we
I
do
mean,
support that. Let me just.
We don't actually pay them through Sage 50. It's just set up with the account, and then we know it's going to happen by an ACH.
Okay.
So I have to key a journal entry to, or I shouldn't say it that way. She keys an ACH payment. She just codes it electronically and then names the payment. You know, instead of a check number, she says ACH number, whatever.
Okay. So I can, if you need to, AP supports ACH directly. So in Sage 100, I can flag a vendor as an electronic payment vendor. And when I flag them as ACH, it enables me to come into electronic payment and then specify the bank account, the routing number, and it's going to ask for the pre-note stuff too. So that all has to be done before I can actually generate it. So when I go, so again, this is flagged. I haven't actually sent the pre-note and it knows that. So let me kind of show you. When I go to check printing electronic payment, now I can go in and create one specific check for, you know, a specific invoice and vendor. I'm going to show you this invoice payment selection is kind of says, show me everything that's due based on a specific date. So show me all the invoices by invoice due date, and I can specify an invoice due date, or I can say by discount due date, or both, or I can say this and do the sneaky little thing and say, I always take my discounts. And then I can say, I want to include ACH vendors or not, or only ACH, default back to a paper check for all electronic payment vendors. So I have the ability to say, yes, I want to include ACH. I want both ACH and paper checks, or you know, kind of one or the other type of a situation. Now in this case, I have dates entered. So when I hit the select button, this shows me all the invoices that are due based on the date that I entered on the previous screen. From here, I can say I want to pay this one. I can use Control or Shift Select to pick the ones that I want to pay, and I'll say okay. And then I can hit the printer icon. It's going to show me all the invoices that have been selected for payment. And then notice, here's where it kind of says, even though this vendor is flagged as electronic payment, I haven't done everything I need to do. So even though I said that for electronic payment, I haven't done the pre-note yet. So it defaults back to a paper check. So it's going to make sure that, you know, everything's set up properly. If everything's not set up properly, you'll get a little note like this and it'll default back to a paper check. But from here, it'll say, do you want to print checks? I'll go ahead and say yes. Now I'm going to be able to update this because I'm not going to physically print my checks, but I can print paper checks and also email, you know, check remittance advice to the ACH vendors here. And this will give me the ability to, again, I can fill in the blanks on a pre-printed check stock, the payee, the date, the amount. I can print everything, including micron coding if you need that, on the check. But then after that is done, notice I can generate the ACH file and upload to the bank. So it may be a little bit of a time saver if you are doing that, to do the ACH, let the system generate the ACH file, and then you manually upload that to your financial institution. But it may be a time saver. So this is going to take care of the GL entries for you automatically. You won't have to do it after the fact. Questions?
Well, right now we don't do it, like I said, through Sage 50. So
Okay.
we just you said we could print. What's the data we can print on our checks? You go. Remember that header we added, that patient name? Would we be able to put that on the check stub?
If it's in the invoice, it should be able to be pulled and added to the check stub in like the check remittance advice. So in a specific invoice. Yeah. So so the check form itself is editable too. So I can add fields to. So if that exists in the database, I should be able to pull that data from the database and have it print on the check stub on the remittance advice.
Awesome. I'm
So any-
trying to make sure. I'm going through my mind of some issues we've had in the past and stuff. So I'm trying to make sure I ask questions. It's just a lot of data to.
Do you have, let me ask you this, do you have 1099 vendors?
Yes.
So that, you can see, I have it, I just say I enable 1099 tracking. Once it's enabled, I can associate the 1099 form with the vendor, and it will start to accumulate from the moment they're flagged. Invoices and payments will go into the 1099 history. At the end of the year, I can create 1099s, and even there's a service that you can integrate with called Atrix, so you can do e-filing through Atrix for 1099s as well.
We haven't been able to do e-filing because for some reason or another.
I want to show you on the vendor on the invoices tab. So, all your invoices here at the top, when I select, I just want to point, let me just take one with the zero balance. So when I select one at the top, notice at the bottom, it shows me all the transactions. So the top is the invoice number, the invoice date, the due date, those details. At the bottom, you see the transactional details. So in this case, we created the invoice, we applied a payment, the check number, the date. So any transaction, payments, adjustments, et cetera, on invoices, you would see at the bottom. And then transactions is all the transactions. So this might be useful if, you sent a payment to a vendor and they misapplied it to the invoices. This gives you the ability to sort by the check number, payment reference number, and then you can see the check number and the invoices that you intended to pay. So you have the information kind of sorted in a way that you can have that conversation with the vendor about what that check should have paid.
Yeah.
All right. There's
a lot more information on this vendor maintenance tab than there is in Sage 50. We don't get to see what the transactions are or the invoices.
Even the checks.
Yeah, we don't get that in the vendor history in Sage 50.
Yeah, and it even goes back to statistics, kind of breaks out your activity, last check number, last payment, your aging, your average days to pay, summary details, period to date, year to date, purchases, payments, discounts taken, lost. History will break out a year by period, purchases, payments. You can even do comparisons to prior year. So there's a lot of detail available for you at the vendor level. So any questions on AP? I know BankRec let me kind of show you BankRec. Now, BankRec, you can set up and maintain multiple bank codes in the system. And you have kind of multiple levels of options. So I can just come in and I can do everything manually, just manually look at the bank statement and reconcile it manually, manually clear checks, check and, you're not really doing AR, checks and adjustments, anything. I can do all that manually.
We do have deposits and stuff, but it's done through general ledgers.
Okay. But on all your AP checks would automatically show up here. And again, you can manually clear those. Another option is you see this auto check reconciliation. We can get a file from your bank, map to that file, and essentially when we import that or run the auto check reconciliation, it would look at the file from the bank. If that check had cleared the bank, it would automatically clear in Sage 100. Now we can go another step on that. There's a tool that we call bank feeds. I don't have a live bank, so I'm going to let me just pull up a Word doc that I can show you. So what this gives me the ability is I can take that bank code and use connect bank feeds, and basically all your big banks, and then there's other banks that we can, regional banks and stuff that we can potentially connect to. It may just depend on your specific financial institution. But once it's connected, instead of the manual process, you can see, so it validates, hey, this bank is connected. The key thing is when you get to the check deposit and adjustment entry, you have this button, get bank fee transaction. So instead of manually reconciling, looking at the bank statement, doing everything manually, or just have it clear the checks, clicking that button will connect to the bank, download the transactions, and where it can, if it exists in both places and it can match it, it will flag it as matched. If it just exists in one place or the other, it only exists in 100 versus came from the bank but doesn't exist in 100, it would basically flag it, and anything that needs your attention, will be flagged as it needs your review. So it will automatically connect to the bank and import the transactions that the bank has on your account versus having to do that, kind of import job to clear the checks and or manual reconciliation. So kind of depends on which route you want to go. Questions? Now, let me ask you, is there anything that you expected to see that you haven't seen today, or maybe it's been a whole lot of information at once? I'm drinking from a fire hose.
I can't think of anything right now. I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I have month-end close to do, so I think I've touched on some of the key issues that I remember. El Marie, do you have anything?
No, nothing for me.
Okay. And Donna, would it be Tracy that we should speak with? I know we have Ron on the line, and Ron had some scoping questions he wanted to ask. Ron, if you want to go ahead and ask a few questions, maybe we can find out if it's Tracy we need to reconnect with or not.
Or
Maybe
it could be Chad. I don't know if Chad's still on the line.
I'm
Check.
still here, but I do have to duck out in 3 minutes for a webinar. But I
gotcha.
may be able to answer, so let's see what we got.
Go ahead, Ron, shoot.
Well, I don't have specifics at this time. They're doing a lot of things. We've covered a lot of customizations and things that would need to go in there.
Okay.
I think the main thing, I'm not real clear on how are you are going into Sage 50 and you're entering in payments to pay the invoice in Sage 50, right?
Correct.
But you're not in all cases sending out the checks.
Most of the time we are sending out checks, but we do have a few ACH.
Okay.
The vendors pull from us. We don't actually pay them.
And they send you a notice that they've drafted X amount. And so, okay, that's fine.
Correct.
That's fine. That was the main thing I was a little questioning on. Now you say that you have three companies, three different companies. Are you expecting to do consolidated financials for those three companies, or are they truly three different companies?
We actually have 4 different companies, but we only consolidate 3 of them.
Okay, so you do want to consolidate 3 of them into one financial statement.
Correct.
Okay.
But we also want to do individual financial statements as well.
Okay. And on your, you've got a lot of different segments and codes in there. You do run, I guess, what I would call, where you do roll up a lot of those to create summary financial statements. Is that something that you want to do?
Correct. Correct. We have both detailed and summary financial statements.
Okay. Okay. And back to where you were talking about, we're putting the your patient's name on the invoices. Are you running reports by, in other words, like the patient John Doe? Are you needing to run reports for John Doe showing all the invoices you've paid on his behalf? And is that something that you do for all patients on a regular basis?
Yes and no. Yes, mainly it's, haven't we already paid this for this patient? Haven't they already billed this for this patient? And we do a search for it, and we can show. And then there are like maybe 10% or 20% of the patients. They'll say, "Well, we need to track what we've spent on this patient, and we'll have to run on that specific patient." But It's more like, well, didn't they already bill us for this patient? This service for this patient? So we have to look. So it's not just the patient's name, it's the service date that we put as an invoice number currently.
Okay. Okay. And so on the invoices that come in for the various patients, the services that they are providing, you're just entering those manually. You're entering what those services were that they provided. You're having to keep up with what's what in there.
Well, a lot of times we don't have to be as specific on the service because the invoice will say, like, if the invoice comes from Mobile X, we know that it's an X-ray. But that particular invoice, like I was saying earlier, would have 10 patients. So that invoice number would have to show up 10 times, but we'd still have 10 separate patients. We would have 10 separate invoices because of the patient's name currently.
Okay. Okay. So you get
And
one
then
invoice
that same
from,
patient. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
you get one invoice from your vendor, invoice number 1234, but it is that invoice covers charges for 10 different patients. So rather than entering in one invoice, you're entering 10 different invoices, one for each
Correct.
patient.
Correct.
Okay. How long are the invoice numbers that you're having to deal with?
Various. If we're entering it by patient name, I think right now it's I think we're limited like at 13 characters.
Okay. But that's working for you in Sage 50 the way that you're doing it, right?
Not really.
It's not, in other words, it's not a long enough field for you to put it in the way that you want to.
Well, because of the fact that the primary search for in Sage 50 searches on that invoice number.
Yep.
But we have to use what we call there's a field in there called vendor invoice or customer invoice. Yeah, customer invoice number. That's where we put the actual invoice number for the vendor. We have to run a special report that pulls that particular number in order. So when the vendor calls, we can say, well, and they said, well, why didn't you pay this invoice or this full invoice? You short paid it. We have to run this specific report in order to see, well, what are they talking about?
Okay. So yeah, because in Sage 50, you can select whether, when you're putting in an invoice, you can select whether it is a vendor or a customer that you want this invoice to be applied to. In Sage 50. In other words, you can select from the customer list or the vendor list when you put that invoice in.
Yeah, well, no, we don't use the customer list. It's strictly vendor.
Okay. Okay. But I guess to simplify it down, so your vendor sends you one invoice, you're going to put 10 different invoices in the system, and then as long as it references those same invoice number, your vendors are okay with applying it that way.
Not necessarily, because now when the check register comes out, instead of having their invoice number on it, it references all the patient's names that are on it. So we have to go in and manually write their invoice number on it.
Okay, I got you. Okay, I think we can come up with a solution for that. That was the main thing that I picked up on. It's not
mud,
deal with
right?
That.
Okay. Well, I'll circle back to Tracy just to make sure we zero in on the correct license count, and then that matter of reporting that you were mentioning. Because you get one license of Sage Intelligence. That's the Excel-based reporting tool that John was showing you, and you get one report designer. But if you're needing more than one person to have the ability to create reports, then you can add extra license of that designer if you need to. I just need to know if that's what she wants or not.
That would be El Marie would have to confirm, or I think we may need quotes for different levels.
Okay.
To see which way senior management leadership would want to go, whether they would want to go with just what we have, and then maybe later on, you know, have a quote that, well, if we did it right now and had enough for all the managers, this is what it would be, and then, you know, they would decide, leadership would decide.
What I'll do, I'll send an email out and I'll include everybody in it, and then I'll spell out what those costs would be per license for the report designer, as well as, you know, just the Sage 100 license as well. And that way, you know, y'all can decide.
Yeah, we want them to be able to, I don't know that they would need to do report designer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we would probably create the report and tell them this is the report you need to run.
Okay.
You know,
It's probably just gonna be view only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got you.
That's right. That's right. You do have that view only access where they can go in and just only see what reports that we already have going on, and look at the different invoices or any attachments related to the invoice itself.
Okay. That's all I need.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thanks, Ron, for joining. Donna, El Marie, thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I did record this, so once I get the recording set up, I'm going to go ahead and download it to YouTube, and I'll send everybody the link, so that way you can take a look at it as much as you need to.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.